The White Sox didn't spend a ton of money this offseason, and actually that's okay because this wasn't the offseason to spend. However, maybe they should have just spent a little bit more, and let's discuss that on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert at SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, the White Sox made a lot of low-cost, practical, prudent moves, but let's discuss if they'll regret not going for a better available player they were linked to, possibly signing, or just would make more sense. Then, if you were asking me where it makes sense to bat Luis Robert Jr., I'll discuss why it should not be the traditional third spot. And finally, the Sox made another minor offseason move that follows what they should be doing at this point in the rebuild, signing failed prospects to see if there's still something there. So, Paul Sullivan in the Chicago Tribune wrote today, the White Sox payroll is projected to rank 29th in baseball, just ahead of the Miami Marlins. Not exactly an ideal place to be coming off a record 121-loss season, but before you point out Jerry Reinsdorf being cheap, and I could see the comments right now, I did an episode a few weeks back where Fangraphs ran a projection of the Sox having Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, and Tariq Skubal, and they would still lose 90 games. So a major spending spree was not going to turn around the Sox fortunes like it did for, say, the Kansas City Royals last season, because the White Sox just don't have a Bobby Witt Jr. And yes, I would love to have had Willy Adames at shortstop because of his power ability, his great leadership skills, and then you could move Colson Montgomery to third base because there's still questions on if he'll even be a good defensive shortstop in the majors. And then you could have moved, like, say, Miguel Vargas to first. But again, adding a big-time free agent was still going to leave the Sox in the very bad column. And you should listen to the Sox Machine podcast with their beat reporter, James Fegan, detailing like just how much overhaul this had to be done this offseason in the front office when it comes to just basic things like data and analytics that most teams are doing these days. The Sox were so far behind that actually where they had to spend was just making like basic investments in technology. Like they didn't even sign up for MLB's like Google Cloud that has all the data and analytics for all 29 other teams. That's how far behind the times the White Sox were. So instead, really, they should be building up the franchise the right way. And that is not only just having good data and analytics, but it's through the draft, international free agency, flipping veterans from our prospect capital. Like James Fegan even pointed out, like I think Brian Bannister had a quote in his piece, his most recent piece, is saying like, look, if we're trading Dylan Cease and Garrett Crochet with only 4 years into the team, we have to keep producing then these guys. We got to produce more of these guys if they're going to have any competitive advantage because the owner won't spend. He won't extend these guys. So that's one thing where you could be upset with Jerry Reinsdorf, but on the same end, then you can't be operating like it's 2005 at the same point. And once the team is ready to be competitive, and if Jerry is still with us, which again is sad that we have to hope he dies, there should be some spending because Jerry did authorize spending during the last previous competitive window. It just wasn't enough. And it was very limited. It was basically a self-imposed salary cap. And it was spent terribly. I mean, it was bad business to put that much money into a bullpen. But every signing, whether it's a major league deal or a minor league deal with an invite to camp or trade, was definitely better than last offseason. And even talking baseball, they put the Sox as an offseason winner. You know, they had that on Twitter. This is that Talking Baseball for those watching on YouTube. The winners and losers of the offseason. And guess who they have right in the winners? They've got your Chicago White Sox. That's right up there with the Los Angeles Dodgers, the New York Mets, you know, those types of guys, you know, those types of teams that will be contending. Hey, the White Sox were considered an offseason winner. And a lot of it is because they at least brought in professional baseball players, whether they're, you know, floors are obviously, you know, very high and their ceilings are very low, whether they're just like platoon guys, because really Mike Tauchman, Austin Slater, and Josh Rojas, they do have value to contenders, but they really are value off the bench where the White Sox are going to be asking them to be starters. But still, that's better than, you know, asking Nicky Lopez to be a starter, who is viewed as now a bench player by the Cubs. I mean, you just had so many guys. You had Corey Julks starting for a while in right field. That's just an example of what they were going with. But it's still worth wondering, are the White Sox going to regret, say, signing pitchers Martin Perez and Bryce Wilson over, say, Jose Quintana and Jacob Junis? Because a reunion with Quintana was always speculated. I mean, he was the one guy that's been listed in the top 50 free agents that if you did a control F in White Sox, there was Jose Quintana tied to them. I know Jim Bowden of The Athletic always had him tied. I believe Major League, MLB.com had him tied. I know James Fox of Future Sox tweeted a while back that I think the Sox were interested in Junis. But Junis is now in Cleveland, and hey, there's still maybe the Sox find some money to bring back Quintana because he's still a free agent. But why I bring this up is the team needs to replace 200 strikeouts with Garrett Crochet gone. And Quintana had 135 last season, and he has 7 seasons of 150 more strikeouts. He also had a 22.2% whiff rate and a career 21.8%. His K percentage last year was 18.8, but his career is 21.6. But when you look at that compared to, say, Perez had 107 strikeouts last season, and he has only 1 season of 150 or more strikeouts. He had a 21% whiff rate last year, but he's a career 19.5. And his K percentage last season was 18.1. His career is 16.3. So it's not like he's going to be missing a ton of bats. He is more of an induced contact guy where, Jose Quintana, I know he's getting up there, but Jose Quintana can still generate swing and misses. Wilson, for example, had 82 strikeouts splitting time between starting and the bullpen for the Brewers. But he also had an injury, so that kind of limited what he did. But he only had 31 Ks in 9 games as a starter. Jacob Junis had 51 strikeouts, but made less appearances overall in the season. And he started 6 games where he had 24 strikeouts. Plus, hitters average with Junis starting was 134 with a 406 OPS. And he had a 1.53 BABIP, where Wilson had a 244 average, opponent's average, a 744 OPS, and a 260 BABIP. Junis had a 24.6 whiff rate in 2024, while Wilson had a 20.8 whiff rate. Wilson had an 18.6 K percentage. Junis had a 20.2 in 2024. And that's where I'm saying, like, maybe you could have just got a little bit better production but you might have had to have spent just a little bit more money because Junis is going to cost the Guardians $4.5 million, while Wilson's going to cost the White Sox $1.05 million. Perez is going to cost $5 million with a $1.5 million buyout. That's part of his $5 million salary this year. So he's basically only costing you $3.5. I think Quintana's price probably should be down to around $8. So if you just spent like $6 million more, maybe you're going to get better production from 2 pitchers that could actually help upgrade your rotation. Not saying that Perez and Wilson can't, but you do need some more swing and misses. And right now, then, you're going to need Jonathan Cannon to get better at that area. You're going to need Drew Thorpe, who's more of a spin guy, to get better at that area. You're going to need Sean Burke, who it does, I think, have the potential to get more strikeouts. And then Davis Martin, because you do want more strikeouts. They're easy outs. The ball doesn't go into play. And with the White Sox defense in the infield being a little bit of a question mark in terms of can they field the position, you don't want the ball going into play that much. So the reason why I'm also tackling this is while I'm fine with the lack of spending, and I am, this was not the offseason to spend. They really did need to overhaul the front office. Like investing in TrackMan for the international department actually is a much better expenditure in the long run for the White Sox. Bringing in more, hiring more data analysts actually will help you because I just gave you data and analytics right there about why this guy might be better, why this guy might be better, because that's what it's looking at. But maybe it would have been better to just not be that frugal and just spend a tick more to ensure you're at least better than the margins. Because, again, I mean, I was on the Au podcast last night with Beefloaf, who's been on the show with us from the 108. And he did say, like, what would be a nice projected win total? And I just said, let's never flirt with 41 losses ever again. And 41 wins ever again. And one of the reasons why, again, the White Sox only won 41 games was they were terrible in the margins. They had a terrible manager for most of the year. They didn't have enough data and analytics to know, like, hey, where should we position our defense? They didn't have enough data and analytics to analyze their base running. And they're now putting that in through all of the minor leagues and their systems. They're actually starting to understand this is how you're supposed to operate. And again, if you're going to have an owner who's saying, I'm not spending on starting pitching, you've got to be better in the margins then. And think about DH. They went and got all or nothing guys like Joey Gallo and Bobby Dahlbeck in terms of like what they're going to produce. They're either going to hit home runs or they're not. And in Bobby Dahlbeck's case, he hasn't hit a lot of home runs recently. But they brought him in on minor league deals with an invite to camp, and that's fine. But this lineup does need power. And both have had power issues lately. JD Martinez, he's a solid veteran, though. He's still in the market. Solid veteran power bat who at least could, maybe also do more than just hit home runs in certain situations, because that's all you're getting with Joey Gallo. He strikes out or he hits home runs. That's it. That's what he does. He's got a career 194 average. JD Martinez has at least produced a much higher career average. And I know he's 37. I know he's very, very old, but he's still at least, we're talking about DH here, and we're talking about, again, maybe just going a little bit more. But he probably wants a guaranteed contract, whereas Gallo and Dahlbeck were like, hey, we'll take whatever we can get to get a shot at the show. But the ironic thing is, the one expenditure the Sox did make this offseason was for Andrew Vaughn. His $5.85 million in arbitration to stay this season. And why that's ironic is because first base is no longer like a really valued position, especially for what he's producing. He's been producing replacement level play. Like I said, you could have gotten Josh Bell or Carlos Santana for a little bit less than what you're getting with Andrew Vaughn. Plus, Andrew Vaughn is creating now, his presence on the lineup has now created a glut in the other defensive positions. It's basically created a logjam that's not ideal. They're going to be putting guys that are probably not ideally where they should be playing in defensive positions because you have to have room for Andrew Vaughn. Like Miguel Vargas' numbers, and I will die on this hill. His defensive numbers support, he gives you at least a better fielder at first base than Andrew Vaughn. Plus, he's 3 inches taller. Josh Rojas' defensive metrics are better at third base. But instead, you're going to have to put Vargas at third since the team still wants to give him a runway. So that means Rojas likely has to go to second. And now you've blocked Chase Mydroth from getting everyday at-bats. Spending money on Vaughn was actually not money well spent after, again, 4 years of being nothing but replacement level. Because you could have actually gotten the same production for cheaper. And I think that's my one critique of the Sox offseason. They penny pinched just a little bit too much. And now you don't have that extra money, for example, to go get, like they could have gotten Jose Quintana, who's just a little bit better than Martin Perez. You could have gotten Jacob Junis, who's just a little bit better than Bryce Wilson. And heck, you probably could have gotten Bryce Wilson too. You could have gotten 3 guys, but instead you're clogging up your infield. Especially if you're looking to save cash. Again, Miguel Vargas is making next to nothing. He could have played first. You even are moving Oscar Colas to first base. He could have played it for cheap. And then you could add Gallo or Dahlbeck. But the mitigating factor in all of this, obviously, and this is why it's just a critique, because even having Andrew Vaughn back, it's not the end of the world, because the White Sox are still going to lose over 100 games. So this is more splitting hairs. Plus the days of Jose Quintana being flipped at the deadline for like Eloy Jimenez and Dylan Cease, those are long gone too. So Martin Perez, hey, if you can get at least a solid prospect in return at the deadline, I'm all for it. Well, a viewer posed another great question that I want to tackle, and that is where to bat Luis Robert Jr. in the order if he's on the opening day roster. There's an interesting stat that supports why it should not be in the 3-hole, and I want to discuss that next on Locked On White Sox. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. And it's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. Same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage up to $5 million, no medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/locked-on. Go to selectquote.com/locked-on today to get started. That's selectquote.com/locked-on. SelectQuote, they shop and you save. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Locked On White Sox, at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. So I remember back in the day when your best hitter should be hitting third. The theory was you get two guys on base in front of him, and then he drives them in or takes a walk, and then you got your best power hitter. He's there to clean up the bases. Thankfully, someone realized your leadoff hitter and your two-hole usually should get, your two-hole hitter usually gets the most at bats. So why not put your best hitters there? And Luis Robert Jr., if he breaks camp with the White Sox and does not get traded before opening day, is clearly the White Sox best hitter, despite hitting, 224 last season. A lot of that was, probably him still dealing with injuries. He missed 62 games with that hip injury. So, when he is healthy, he is one of the White Sox best hitters. And at Southside Serg88, he asked this question in the comments page on yesterday's episode. Also, if Robert DHs more to keep health, could he be given another shot at being leadoff to get the most out of him, or do we keep him at third bat to get the most out of him? And honestly, I would definitely not bat him third anymore, based on this stat pulled from Kin Knows Ball on Twitter. So I have the graphic up for those watching on YouTube. This is @_24Kin. He goes, why your best hitter should not bat third. The 3 spot in the lineup comes with 2 outs and no runners on, far more than any spot in the lineup. This is the 2023 season, for example. The 3-hole is a filler spot where you put your 5th best hitter. And the stat is 4,630 plate appearances happen with the 3-hole hitter in the lineup where there was 2 outs and no runners on. And considering Luis Robert Jr. is probably your best run producer with his power ability, and especially if he's going right, and if he's likely to come up to the plate with 2 outs and no runners on, you're not getting any value out of him to actually drive in runs, multiple runs. Because, again, the White Sox offense was so terrible that, great, you get a solo shot, but they still could not come back from a lot of these deficits. They were one of the worst. They had 505 runs last year. So you're thinking, well, wow, Todd, you're jumping ahead now to having multiple runs. Yes, you still want to score as many runs as possible with your lineup. And remember, RBIs is a product of your teammates getting on base. It's 50% of that. Why do you think, guys, I don't mention RBIs much in people's stats anymore, whenever I mention stats? Because a lot of it is predicated on what the guy ahead of you is doing. It's logic, okay? If a guy's not on base, you don't have an opportunity to bat in the runner. Simple. Hey, I know. Now, obviously, I would say the other 50%, like, I'm not on that die on that hill, like, well, it's just what everybody else does. Like, you still have to produce in those moments. For LRJ, though, his ability to drive in runs, though, is mostly in his power ability in this lineup because his career numbers actually do not support that. He's actually a guy that's always going to be driving in runs with guys on base. His career slash line with runners in scoring position is 245, 301, 433. He's got 149 RBIs, but 125 strikeouts. So a lot of times he's, and he is a strikeout guy. He strikes out 30% of the time. That's where he's going to probably strike out is 125 times, as you've seen. So I say you bat him second. And you have Mike Tauchman leading off with his ability to get on base. And also Luis Robert Jr.'s career numbers are much better when he's hitting second. And also, they're much better when he's hitting with at least a man on first. His slash line with a man on first, 272, 309, 470 slash line. He only has 20 career grounded in his double plays. I was stunned when I saw that number. And it's on Baseball Reference. And then just getting back into my notes, hitting second, his career slash line is 276, 312, 453. However, when he does hit third, he has 45 home runs. So obviously I get the question. But I'm going to still say go hit him second. Because again, in 464 plate appearances, Mike Tauchman at leadoff has a 349 on-base percentage. Now, it obviously does jump to 390 in the 2-hole for him, but it's also 100 at-bats. But at least you have practically a full season's worth of at-bats and plate appearance data to know Tauchman gives you a great shot to at least get a guy on base to start the game or to start an inning, depending on where he's hitting. And then he's got at least average base running metrics according to Baseball Savant. So at least he can run the bases solid. Like, obviously he's not going to be swiping 20 bags because, again, I get why you might want to put Luis Robert Jr. at leadoff because he actually did steal, I want to say it was 24 bases, 30 bases or something. And he does have 30, even 40 potential if he stays healthy. But if you throw Luis in the 2-hole, you at least have his talented bat to possibly hit home runs to make it 2-0, or hit a double to maybe get Tauchman home or into, to third base. Or at least you got data to support that in the 2-hole, Robert Jr. is likely not going to hit into a double play because he's probably going to strike out. And also MLB.com's Mike Petrillo, he wrote this in 2023 about why you should put your best hitter in at least the 2-hole. Because lineups simply aren't constructed in the same way they were back in Babe Ruth's day, when it was mainly put the fastest hitter at the top, the good bat control guy at second, your best hitters third and fourth, no matter whether those first two hitters could actually hit or even get on base. Instead, the trend over the last decade has been about getting your best hitters as many plate appearances as you can, as often as you can, which means not putting lesser hitters in front of better hitters. It means great hitters bat first. It means great hitters bat second too. Simply look around at the sport today. And again, this is from 2023, back to the article, and see how lineups are put together. Ronald Acuna Jr. hits leadoff. So does Mookie Betts and Christian Yelich and Kyle Schwarber and George Springer and Adley Rutschman. Freddie Freeman hits second, just like Mike Trout, Aaron Judge, Corey Seager, and Paul Goldschmidt. Julio Rodriguez and Shohei Ohtani have bounced between the top two spots. If he played today, you might just have seen the Babe hitting second too. If the trend is accelerated over the last decade, and it has, then it's truly reached a tipping point in 2023. For the first time in the live ball era of AL/NL baseball since 1920, the second spot in the order is more productive on a relative basis than the third spot. Although, there are still, like, if you do just like a Google search, where do you hit your best hitters? You still get these old school guys that are like, well, you got to bet him third and fourth. But I did come across an article from a former college player saying you actually should bat a guy where he's most comfortable. He was detailing like, hey, man, I was asked to bat leadoff because of my numbers, supporting I was a good hitter, but I just was not comfortable batting leadoff. But you do have his career numbers supporting hitting second, because hitting first, he's only had 149 plate appearances. But Luis Robert Jr.'s career numbers hitting first, he has a 252 average with a 705 OPS. 890 plate appearances hitting third, he's got a 261 average, but he does drive the ball more in that hole with a 798 OPS. But it's mostly made up by his 486 slugging percentage. But however, as I discussed just a second ago, do you want to waste at bats where he's likely hitting with no runners on? Now, again, you could say, well, you just said Mike Tauchman, he's got a high on base percentage, and maybe if Chase Maedroth is up, he's potentially going to be a high on base percentage. What if you're getting these guys that have high on base percentages in front of them? Then, yeah, you might want Luis Robert Jr. and his slugging percentage in the 3-hole. It's just, I think you want to make sure you're giving Luis Robert Jr. as many at bats as possible, to get him going. And you could say, well, who's going to back him up then? Well, Andrew Benintendi, actually, I was looking at his career numbers, hitting third, 311, 392, 472 slash line with runners in scoring position, 373 career RBIs, and he has an 822 OPS and 587 plate appearances in 3-hole. So he's actually, for his career, obviously he's been terrible with the White Sox, but for his career, he's actually been good with runners in scoring position, and he's actually, got his best OPS is in the 3-hole. Well, circling back to the White Sox player additions, the team claimed former top 100 prospect pitcher Owen White off of waivers. And let's discuss why this is just another practical and prudent move, despite his terrible big league numbers. Let's discuss that next on Locked On White Sox. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. So if you look at Owen White's career big league numbers, you would think he cannot get anyone out. He has a career 16.71 ERA in 5 big league appearances. And yet, this is actually the type of waiver claim the Sox should be making, as MLB trade rumors correctly pointed out. White, 25, is a logical pickup for the White Sox. He's had rough results for the past 2 years, but was a top 100 prospect before that. The Sox aren't expecting to be good anytime soon, with their 2024 season being historically bad. Of the 30 clubs in the league, they are the one best position to take a flyer and hope for a bounce back. White also has one option year remaining, so he can be kept in AAA throughout 2025 as the club gets a close-up look at him. And therefore, in Brian Bannister, I trust. As maybe he just needs to work with a pitching guru to finally unlock what made him a second-round pick out of high school in 2018. Maybe he needs that forward thinking. I think Mike Maddox is still the pitching coach for the Rangers, and he's a forward thing. He's more of a traditional guy. I mean, he's had success developing guys, but Brian Bannister is cutting edge. So in Brian Bannister, I trust. And when it comes to White's professional career, it did get delayed. Basically to start, he needed Tommy John surgery, so wiped out his entire 2019 season. No minors in 2020 because of the pandemic. So he doesn't start his big league career until 2021. He showed some promise with a 3.06 ERA in 2021 in rookie ball and low A. Then in 3.59 ERA in 2022 between high A and double A. And he had a 3.51 ERA at double A to start 2023. But then things just started to spiral for him. Like, I don't know. He just struggled to get guys out. He had a 4.99 ERA at AAA and a 1.61 whip. And he had 4 innings with the Rangers. He had an 11.25 ERA in those 4 innings. Last year, he made 3 appearances for the Rangers with a 24 ERA and then a 5.64 ERA at AAA, where they even tried him as a reliever. And he had a 5.5 ERA when he was in relief. Gets DFA'd, traded to the Reds. Gets waived, claimed by the Yankees. Gets waived again. And that's how the Sox claimed him, and that's how they're going to replace Kai Busch on the 40-man roster, because Kai Busch, they had one more move to make. They had to move Kai Busch to the 60-day DL or 60-day IL. So that's why they're going to be able to give White a shot. And again, I'm all for it, actually. Tap in, and especially since I think they're tapping into the adults in the room. Will Venable likely has some knowledge of him. And again, you could see if Bannister can fix something in White, because White's still 25 years old. And right off the bat, I think he can benefit from Bannister's pitching principles, because this guy can throw 7 pitches, and that's got to be pared down. Okay? That's just too many pitches. Like, great, you can throw 7 pitches. Fantastic. Can you throw them for strikes? Can you actually get outs? And maybe he needs to throw his cutter more. He threw 8 cutters in the big leagues on Baseball Savant last year, and it was the one pitch no one got a hit off of. And it was in the strike zone, according to the heat maps. Although he threw 25 of them in 2023, and it was a 714 slugging percentage. Oh, boy. But still, find maybe 2 or 3 pitches that he can really effectively throw a lot, and maybe he can be an effective reliever. And also, again, it can't hurt to have some depth, because you just don't know what's going to happen to your starting pitchers. You need now at least probably 8 or 9 guys total for starting pitchers. 5 in your big league rotation, at least 4 in AAA that you definitely can think these guys can at least cover a game or 2. So I think the hope is maybe you fix White up and see if he can cover a game or 2, and then maybe be a viable bullpen option. But again, Sox, yeah, you should be grabbing as many of these failed prospects and see if you can figure something out. You've actually now made the investment in the technology. You've got a pitching guru like Brian Bannister to help you make sense of your pitching lab stuff. So why not? Give this a shot. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout spring training. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow to discuss why it's actually smart that the White Sox are not going to pay any of these promising prospects before they actually prove something. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding if the Sox will regret not spending a few extra bucks in free agency, where Luis Robert Jr. should hit, and the Sox making a good waiver claim. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dubber, at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.